Hello, I'm Donal, and I want to briefly introduce the concept of silence in helping and counselling work. This can be difficult for trainees in the helping professions, especially in the early stages of training. It can feel uncomfortable or awkward because it's not something we're used to. There are lots of reasons why silence can be difficult. For some, it may remind them of something negative happening, or perhaps it's been used as a punishment to freeze them out. It can also be hard for people who grew up in the role of the fixer, the rescuer, the person who has to make it all okay for other people and spare or minimize their discomfort. And most trainees I've worked with will fall into this, at least in part. Because they're in the role of the helper or counselor, they can feel that they have to keep doing or saying something. But this isn't really useful or supportive. Remember, we're trying to understand the other person and help them to feel empowered. We want to give them a different model of relationship from those they may be experiencing in their lives, and especially the difficult ones. The person you're helping may value some silence as a space where they don't feel rushed, and a time to make their own connections and links. They might want to think about what to say, or how to say it, maybe think about what you've just said. Or they simply might need time to recover from strong emotions. So, in any helping work that involves talking, it's important to think about pace and space. Give time. Don't feel that you've got to keep rushing forward or jumping in with an intervention as soon as the other person stops talking. And certainly don't just make an intervention for the sake of easing discomfort, either your own or the other person's. This may be something that the person is experiencing for the first time, and it could be of great benefit for them to realize that they can sit with it and process it. And when the time feels right, you could simply reflect that you seem quite uncomfortable, and allow them the space to process that or respond in their own way. And better still if you can link it to whatever the theme of the session is. Something like, I noticed that when we were talking about the relationship with your dad, you became quiet and you looked quite uncomfortable. Then leave it there, leave it to them. If, for example, you ask somebody to tell you more about that situation, whatever the situation happens to be, and they go silent, when you feel it's okay to end the silence, and this is always a judgment call, it wouldn't be helpful to ask about something else, or to just reflect or summarize something earlier in the session. But it would be helpful to reflect that this seems like something they're struggling to talk about. And then you might look at what it's like to be struggling with that particular situation, or whatever it is. In early training, it's often thought that we're just working with the words, working with the narrative, but in fact we're working with the whole person, how they say something, what they look like when they're saying it, the tone of their voice, the changes in tone and inflection, body language, facial expressions, and often what they're not saying or what they might be struggling with. And a lot of that can come through in silence. If you think about silence in your own relationships, you'll know that communication has by no means stopped or even paused. A lot of stuff is going on without words. It could be discomfort. It could be a feeling of being at ease, just being pensive, sad, angry, lost, or just a space to process something or collect thoughts, perhaps process feelings. The important thing to remember is that silence is a form of communication, and I'm quite sure I don't have to tell you, it can be very, very powerful. Silence can also be an attempt to get a response from the helper or counselor, maybe approval or advice. You'll have clues that this might be what's going on because the person might be looking at you in a particular way. don't fall into this manipulation, because it's likely a pattern for that person. Perhaps they look for approval from others because they don't feel good enough in themselves. Instead, be inquisitive. Reflect that it feels like they want you to say something, and take it from there. They might ask for advice, or want to know what you would do. There are several ways to be helpful when this happens. You could say something like, "It sounds like you don't trust yourself to know what to do." Or, depending on the person and what's going on, you might say something like, "Well, you and I are different people with different experiences, so what might be right for me might not be right for you. But how about if we look at it together and see what you could do, or say, or whatever it is?" Always remember, a large part of what we're doing is empowering people. We're helping them to break old patterns, to become more self-reliant, trust themselves more, and generally have a better sense of self. If we simply respond in the same way as other people in their lives, rescuing, giving advice, telling them what to do, always giving approval even when it isn't needed, we could simply be compounding those old patterns. And that might be familiar and comforting, but it doesn't help somebody to grow, to make changes that'll be lasting and enhance their life. And all of this came out of just thinking about silence and the impact it can have when it's managed appropriately and effectively. I do hope that you found that helpful, and I wish you well in your studies wherever you are. Take care.